I haven't made a video in a long time. Last time I made a video, I was in a long-term relationship. I was employed, I had a different roommate. Cut to now. Those things are different. But truly the purpose of this video is not to just tell you all of the things. I mean, yes, it kind of is, partially that. Hold on, my fan's too loud. It's also to tell you about all the books that I have read recently. That's the whole point of this channel. Hold on, the fan's still too loud. Cinema. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is I read Bloodmarked, which is the sequel to Legendborn, YA novel, very popular, fantasy, set in North Carolina. I live in North Carolina, so gotta love that. I really enjoyed this. I listened to this audiobook when I first started playing Dreamlight Valley in sort of an intense way, meaning that I was like making my Dreamlight Valley village very pretty, and I just associate it with that, which I think is a special memory. I don't have much more to say about it. I thought it was a strong sequel. A lot of people hated it. Not me. Not little old me. You know what I do hate? When I turned off my fan, I'm starting to perspirate. I read Icebreakers, which is a popular book talk book, romance novel about a hockey team and a figure skater, and specifically the captain of the hockey team and the star figure skater. You know, they fall in love, enemies to lovers, sort of, more like friends to lovers. I don't really know which trope it sits with. It could sit with both. Point being, this was cute. I would say if you like the Bromance Book Club series, it's very much in a similar vein. A lot of like, you know, upending toxic masculinity and like a very traditionally masculine sport. Some good conversations about consent and respect. And overall, a fun novel. I enjoyed this. Next, I read The Midnight Bargain. This has one of the worst covers for being such a magical, fun read. I think this cover is giving middle-aged woman who only reads at the airport vibes. Nothing wrong with that. That's not really particularly my vibe, you know. But I really enjoyed this. This is like a fantasy setting, sort of like a alternative universe in Victorian or Regency era England-ish, England light. It's not really England, but you know what I mean. Similar customs and vibes, but told in this really fun way. It kind of takes these ideas, adds magic to it, adds like class and gender to it, and what women can or cannot do depending on their class and how much money they were born with, and just generally, you know, because they were born a woman. Really interesting ideas of like, you know, women being used for one thing and one thing only, having babies. So there's a bit of like this Handmaid's Tale element to it. And also it has a really fun sensual romance that I enjoyed. Again, thought it was respectful, fun, sweet, slow burn. My vibe for sure. Next, I read Down the Rabbit Hole, Curious Adventures and Cautionary Tales of a Former Playboy Bunny. This is Holly Madison's memoir. I decided to read this because I went through this period of time in the winter where I was watching a lot of Girl Next Door, and then I watched the like Playboy behind the scenes documentary that was really dark and very interesting, and I was just kind of interested to hear about what Holly Madison had to say. Now, this was an interesting read in the sense that I don't think she goes far enough, and I don't think she was comfortable to go that far because Hugh Hefner was still alive when she was writing this book. So I think nowadays she talks about it a lot more openly than she did then, and it makes sense. But to kind of understand how she ended up as a Playboy bunny, how she ended up, you know, in this house dating Hugh Hefner, it's very interesting. And she does get into some of like the nitty gritty and bad, horrible stuff that was going on. I really got a lot out of this book and also didn't. And I think if you read this book and also watch the documentary, that's probably the perfect pairing if it's something you're interested in. Next, I read Mame, which is a literary fiction novel set in England about a young Black woman who lives with her father who has ailing health. She has to take care of him. She sort of like stopped her growing and her path forward as a young woman in her mid-20s living in a huge city like London. Her mom doesn't live with her and her father, so she really has the brunt like sole responsibility, and basically she decides to finally go out on her own. She deals with guilt with leaving her chronically ill father. She deals with like all of the resentment she has towards her mother and brother who left her to take care of her father, and just like dating for the first time and trying to navigate relationships, online dating, her own self-worth, living with housemates for the first time. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's done in such a thoughtful, quiet way. It's quite a quiet novel. It's beautiful, it's sad, it's funny at times, and it's something that I just really enjoyed. So I would say definitely pick this one up. Next, I read The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. I didn't know what to think. I hadn't read anything by this author before, but I was excited to pick it up. I had it as a NetGalley audio arc, so I was like, this is quite fancy. The audiobook is amazing. It has two narrators, but the way they do it almost feels like it's a podcast, but it's a podcast set in this fantasy fictional world with pirates. So it's kind of like fantastic. The main character is this like legendary female pirate who's now since retired and just wants to take care of her daughter, but an amazing job comes her way and she can't say no, and she goes on this grand adventure getting the gang back together, going forth and trying to solve these mysteries. I can't really tell you much about the plot because the plot isn't, I don't think, that important. I think it's really a character story of our main character and her life and her relationship with being a mother, and I just really enjoyed it. It was funny, it was smart, it was just very sweeping and exciting, and one that I would definitely pick up this year. Next, I read Not Your Ex's Hexes, which has got to be one of the most difficult titles to say for me sometimes. This is the second book in the Supernatural Singles series. The first book was Not the Witch You Wed, which came out, I guess, last year, if I want to say. I don't remember. I think I read it in 2021. Point being, this one came out. It was even better than the first book. This is a universe in which witches and demons and wizards and werewolves all live in cohabitation with humans. They have their own form of government, their own like bars and restaurants and jobs and all of that. And this series follows these three sisters who are very well known and famous in the society for being these fancy witches. And this is about the second book, which follows the kind of prim and proper sister who is always told that she was going to take over. Now that has not happened. She kind of can do what she wants now, and she starts to fall for this gruff, handsome, interesting demon man. The plot in this book is really fun. I think it's really entertaining. Like, I love sort of like almost the procedural style to a romance novel of like figuring out mysteries and falling in love. I liked their chemistry. I thought that the audiobook was really good, and this is just like a fun read. Next, I read The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This is another like book talk favorite, and this book, Icebreakers good, Fine Print no. I read The Fine Print because I was like, a book about a fake Disneyland, Disney World, so fun. I love theme parks. I want to know the inaccuracies. Not like it matters, but for real. I want answers to my burning questions. How many people work at Dreamland, whatever the hell park? How many people work there? Like, why do they still work on the property, like above, you know, Main Street? Like, this is 1950s Disneyland. They don't know, that doesn't happen anymore. There's just so many thoughts I had in my head. It's a book, it's fiction. This is about the CEO, or like soon to be CEO, and there's brothers and they're all taking over because their grandfather died, and they have to do certain things in order for them to get their inheritance and what they want. And about a girl who's just like a makeup artist at like a bippity boppity boutique, which is just like horrific to think about. And she ends up like basically because she's hot, in my head it's because she's hot, gets moved up to like an Imagineering position. This is just so wild because again, this would never happen ever. Point being though, they fall in love. I hated this book. I thought it was just horse shit. It's boring and also like really visceral, and that's kind of like the worst combination. The writing is bad, the storyline is bad, it is just bad. It's a bad book. Now, would I read a sequel? Probably, because I did enjoy myself. I read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, another book talk favorite in the cozy fantasy genre. This was cute. I did enjoy this. It's short, it's fun. You know, it has this like D&D quality that I liked about it. Like we have this woman and she's just living life, kind of being a disappointment to her family. And then this demon shows up and they have to go on a quest. And there's also a lot of like emotional heart here that I wasn't expecting. It's fun, it's sexy, it's like a cute book, but also there are some nice like threads of family and acceptance and loss and grieving that I thought was done very well. So yes, very cute book. Oh my gosh. Next, we are gonna hit the saga, the books that gave me a book hangover. I have to shout out my dear friend Ileana. She told me about this series. I probably would not have read it if it weren't for her, but holy hell, I loved it. I read the entirety of the Mirror Visitor series. There are 4 books: A Winter's Promise, The Missing of Claire de Lune, The Memory of Babel, and The Storm of Echoes. This is a translated from French fantasy story. It's kind of difficult to explain, but it's somewhere between like Game of Thrones, Stardust, a Jasper Fforde novel in parts. It's like quirky, dark, serious, murdery, romantic, intense, really weird world building, and it gets weirder with each book. I would say my greatest piece of advice here is to not really worry about what's going on because you won't understand it. Unless I guess you have a PhD in this author's brain. So I don't know, but I loved every second of it. The audiobook, just like top notch, like really, really, really good and well narrated. But also what you have here is a main character who is sort of has to be in an arranged marriage in order her to sort of faction, communities, families to come together. She's married off, sent to like the high north to this man who's just like a Mr. Darcy type. She's sort of bookish, quiet, unassuming, loves her antiques, just like a quiet person. And as the story goes on, she gets stronger and stronger and is put through absolute hell. We have a really, I'm talking about really slow burn romance here that I think has moments of payoff that are incredible and so sweet. This isn't a romance though. This is not a romance. It has romance in it. I love this series. I would highly recommend. Next, I read another book talk favorite, Twisted Love. This book is 2010's YA novel wrapped up in an adult spicy romance. What is there to say? Gruff man who got his money in an interesting way. Pretty quiet younger girl who's, you know, the younger sister of gruff man's best friend and is forbidden, but best friend is away helping people, so they have to fall in love. Overly protective, very intense, really wild plot line. I don't know. It was a ride. Would I read book 2? Maybe. Because was it good? No, but did I enjoy myself? Yes. I read Unscripted, the epic battle for a media empire and the Redstone family legacy. I'm a huge Succession fan, and this is sort of real-life Succession.
I love you, but you are not serious people.
This book talks about the Redstone family who own Viacom, CBS, Paramount Pictures, and the end of their patriarch Summer Redstone's life, the last years of his life, when betrayal, intrigue, drama, polyamory with an old man were all happening. It is such an interesting read. It feels like a very long podcast, which is what I love about nonfiction audiobooks. I enjoyed this so much. It was disturbing. It also goes into a bit of the Me Too movement, talking about Les Moonves, who's the former CEO of CBS, who during the Me Too movement got outed as being a serial, like, creepy, horrible man. Lots of interesting conversations. I really, really, really got a lot out of this. Next, I read Patricia Wants to Cuddle, another just like wild romp. I read Beauty Queens when I was in high school, and I love that book by Libba Bray. It's about a bunch of beauty queens who get stranded on an island, and it's like Lost meets reality TV meets like bucking the ideas of femininity. This felt like that, but not as good. know a lot of people really like this book, but I didn't love it. It's about like a bachelor reality show and 4 of the final contestants, and they end up on this weird island where there's this Bigfoot type character who starts, you know, killing the crew and the cast, and it's a bit of a mystery. I thought it was really interesting for this like horror, body horror sort of idea, but my problem was I really hated the way it talked about mental health. I think if you have any sort of like wobbles with your mental health, as most people do, this could be kind of triggering. I think specifically the final girl of this book talks about it in a way that I don't think is very healthy, and it's never challenged. And it works out in the end, but they don't really ever deal with sort of those thoughts in a way that I think would be helpful on page. This book is wild and weird, and it's good. It's well written. I just don't think it's for me. Okay, so that is everything I've read recently. Reading Happy Place, watching Summer House. Can't wait for a new episode of Vanderpump Rules. We're here. What have you been reading? Tell me your thoughts, please. Okay.